Hi, it is me, Jenai M, Marek, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about podcasts. I recently did my first author interview on a podcast titled Under the Crossbones with Phil Johnson, the host. And it had me thinking, when it comes to marketing, I didn't know very much about podcasts, even though I listen to them quite frequently. And I realized that everyone I know actually enjoys listening to podcasts, so I decided to do a little research. And here's what I found out about podcasts in general, as far as being an avenue to kind of promote your work. And these statistics are American-based. I'm sure the statistics are not that much different in European countries, Great Britain as well. So keep that in mind. These are American statistics, but that doesn't mean that they probably aren't applicable to wherever you're from. 112 million Americans have listened to a podcast. And that number is actually up 11% from 2016, because I'm looking at the 2017 statistics basically at this time. Overall, 40% of Americans aged 12 or older have listened to a podcast at some point in their life. That's actually really good for writers, because we want to reach out to the podcast audience, because people who listen to podcasts are going to be your target, within your target audience. 12 and up is, of course, we start reading much earlier than that, but 12 is when you really start deciding for yourself what content you want to be really diving into. So anyway, moving on. 67 million Americans listen to podcasts monthly, and that's up 14% in a year. Today, 24% of Americans aged 12 or older actually listen monthly, and I fall into that category as well. I listen to podcasts monthly. I listen to them weekly, in fact. I have one I listen to every single time they release a new podcast. I listen to it. I download it if I don't listen to it right when it's first out. Really great if you're looking to market your book, because you will hit a large audience. And this is actually my favorite statistic of all. Out of everything I learned about podcasts for this last year, 2017, 85% of listeners hear all or most of that podcast. That's huge. When compared to just general web surfing, in today's media world, most people have like a 3-minute attention span when they're looking at a website. I think it's typically less than 10% of the website, any given page, that a viewer might actually look at. So let's say you click on a link. For about 3 minutes, you'll browse the link and you'll only get about 10% of it if it's a new link that you're looking at. But when somebody listens and logs on to a podcast, 85% of listeners listen to almost the entire thing, if not the whole thing. That's a really good statistic. So yeah, I wanted to talk about that because, like I said, I recently did a pre-recorded interview with Phil Johnson of Under the Crossbones. My episode with him is going to be released this year, February 6th. And I had so much fun talking about my book with him that I thought, this is a great avenue to let other authors and writers know there's no shame in contacting the creators of podcasts and say, hey, this is the type of book I'm writing. Would you be interested in learning more about it and sharing this information with your listeners? My target audience is such and such and such. Your target audience is the same. For example, again, I wrote a pirate book, so Under the Crossbones podcast was a good avenue for me. Let's say that you are writing a fantasy fiction, and it's based on fae politics. Find somebody who does a podcast about Renaissance fairs. That would probably be a huge market for you to hit, and with how many people actually enjoy listening to podcasts. Or, for example, if you are writing literary fiction piece, maybe young adult, maybe find a podcast that discusses a lot of coming of age themes in a humorous light, because their audience are probably going to be really interested in the type of book you're writing. So again, when you're thinking about who your target audience is, you want to find other people who already have that developed readership, but of course in their case it's going to be a listenership. If you can get in touch with them and speak to them one-on-one a little bit, say, hey, I'm very interested, I listened to your show, and please don't cold call somebody without ever listening to any of their episodes. Make sure that their content is something that your book would fit into. You don't want to just find a podcast host and be like, hey, I want to be on your show. Well, great, what's your book about? And you explain it, and they're like, yeah, we don't talk about anything like that on my show. You don't want to be in that situation because, one, I would find that personally embarrassing, and two, if you do get your book out there a little bit more, you don't want this person bad-mouthing your book later on by saying how much of an idiot the writer is. So, I mean, there's those things to think about as well. That's common sense, though. I shouldn't even have to say that. I'm curious now, what kind of podcasts do you all listen to, especially the writers in Right Up Our Alley? Do you have favorite podcasts? Do you have podcasts that you used to love that you don't anymore? I just wanted to start a discussion. We can go ahead and talk about that down here in comments. And for those of you who are not in Right Up Our Alley, but just tuning in, feel free to join the conversation. So that's all I wanted to talk about this week. And I haven't really decided exactly what I'll be bringing up on my next Thursday, but I will see you then. Ciao.
I too can command the wind, sir! I have a hurricane in me that will strip Spain bare if you dare to try me!